I was browsing through the thrift store's surprisingly deep section of political nonfiction books when I felt a tug at my arm.
Dad, can I get this?
My 9-year-old daughter Juniper asked. She was holding a teddy bear. It had brown fur and was maybe a foot tall. Each paw had little sewn-on patches for pads, and it was wearing a little blue and white checkered bow around its neck. The mouth was stitched into a friendly smile. The thing looked like it was in pretty good condition, with no major rips or stains. The eyes were a bit creepy, though. Most bears had those little black beans, or maybe buttons, for eyes. These ones looked more like doll's eyes, round and with blue irises and black pupils surrounded by white. Juniper was staring up at me, begging me with that cute face she did when she wanted something. I mean, it was a teddy bear in a thrift store. I'm sure I could afford it. But as a parent, I'd learned not to give in to my kids' whims too easily. You had to fight them a little, or they could get spoiled.
Well, how much is it?
I said. Sensing I might break down and buy it, Juniper eagerly showed me the bright green sticker that had been placed on its chest.
Only $4! 4 whole dollars?
I said.
I don't know. You have a lot of toys at home. Dad, come on, please.
I laughed and said.
Oh, all right. Yes!
Juniper shouted before running over to the register, staring at me expectantly. I guess we were done shopping. The cashier, a young blonde woman with a flower tattoo on her wrist, rang us up. She frowned as she picked up the bear and took the sticker off.
Something wrong?
I asked.
No, nothing wrong,
she said, glancing at Juniper.
It's just, this bear was one of the items that came to us from an estate sale. I heard the family. It's just a little sad.
It was definitely a little sad, but not really an appropriate topic of conversation for my 9-year-old. So I moved the transaction along and dragged Juniper out of the store before she could ask any uncomfortable questions. After grocery shopping, Juniper and I arrived home to find her mother, my wife, was home early from the firm.
You bought her another toy,
Callie said with a raised eyebrow as Juniper scurried off to her room to play with her new friend.
Well, I also bought you flowers,
I said, lifting the bouquet from one of the brown paper bags I was carrying. Technically, I'd bought flowers for the dining room table vase, but Callie didn't have to know that. She'd probably put them there anyway. She took the flowers in her hands and breathed deep, inhaling their scent. Her shoulders relaxed and her eyes twinkled.
You know, you're getting pretty good at this house husband thing.
4 months ago, the tech startup I'd been working for had collapsed with basically no warning, leaving me jobless. But at the same time, Callie had made partner at work. Her new salary wasn't quite the same as both of our old ones put together, but we figured it was enough for us to be comfortable if I wanted to stay home with Juniper. And I really did want to. Not only was I burned out from the late nights and grueling pace of the tech industry, I also felt like I was missing out on my kids' childhood. So we'd decided I'd take over household duties while Callie brought home the bacon. Callie took the flowers and, just as I'd thought, placed them in the vase on the kitchen table.
Remember, I've got to fly out to New York tomorrow, so it'll be just you and Junie while I'm gone. I remember. Go kick opposing counsel's ass.
She winked and said,
I always do.
The next morning, Callie was already out of the house and probably in the air by the time I woke up. I went to wake Juniper so she could get ready for school, but she was already awake. I could hear her voice through the door as I approached.
This one or this one?
She said. I knocked.
Juniper, can I come in?
I asked.
Yes.
She called back. I opened the door and saw that Juniper was in her pajamas, holding 2 shirts, one purple and one blue, out in front of her.
Who are you talking to, honey?
Bradley.
Who's Bradley?
My bear.
She sort of gestured to the corner of the room where I saw the teddy bear I just bought for her, which I guess had been named Bradley. He was sitting in the white chair Juniper normally used as a surface to store clothes and toys on.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just checking you were up. I'll be downstairs making breakfast. Come down when you're dressed. And don't forget to brush your teeth.
I won't.
With that done, I closed the door and headed down the stairs. As I descended, I heard Juniper's faint voice.
Bradley, stop. I can't change if you don't stop hugging my leg.
I shook my head. Kids. They have such active imaginations. Hearing her say stuff like that made me glad I was a stay-at-home dad. A few minutes later, I had toast and cereal laid out on the table when Juniper came bounding down in the purple shirt, carrying both her backpack and Bradley the teddy bear. She set him down in the chair next to her.
Is Bradley going to eat with us?
I asked, trying to encourage my daughter's imagination.
Bradley doesn't eat, but I'm going to take him to school with me so I can show him around.
Juniper started digging into the food with gusto. I didn't want to rain on her parade, but...
Honey, I don't think it's a good idea if Bradley goes with you to school. He might get lost or damaged. Plus, I don't think your teacher would allow him to stay with you during class.
But Dad...
Her eyes were turning glassy. She was getting ready to deploy the waterworks.
I'm sorry, Junie, but tell you what,
I said.
what if I take him around with me all day? That way you know he's safe and someone's looking after him while you're gone.
She frowned, not loving the idea, but she knew I wasn't going to budge on her bringing Bradley to school.
Pinky promise?
She said, extending her pinky towards me.
Pinky promise,
I said, intertwining our fingers together. I didn't have many outside the house duties that day, so it hardly mattered if Bradley the bear was with me too.
Okay, now time to get in the car to go to school.
Drop-off was the usual whirlwind, especially since Juniper was still a little sulky about having to leave Bradley behind. But I got it done. I picked up a few odds and ends at the grocery store on the way back and then headed home. The second I walked through the door, something felt off. The house was quiet, which of course it was. I was the only person there. But it was strange. I felt that rather than the house being quiet because it was empty, it was quiet because something in the house was choosing not to make any noise. I glanced in the living room and up the stairs and didn't see anything out of the ordinary, so I figured it was just my imagination. That is, until I walked into the kitchen to put the groceries away and saw that Bradley wasn't where he was supposed to be. I was positive Juniper had left him on the chair next to her, and yet there he was, sitting on top of the table, staring at me with his slightly too real eyes.
Hey, buddy. How'd you get up there?
I asked. There was no answer. Not that I'd been expecting one. I picked him up and examined him. There was nothing particularly strange about the teddy bear.
Did you pull yourself up on your own?
The bear's head, previously angled towards my shoulder, slowly turned to face me. Not believing what I was seeing, I just stared at it, dumbfounded for a moment. Then it nodded.
Jesus!
I threw both the bear and the grocery bag to the ground and jumped back towards the doorframe, ready to bolt. He had landed face down on the floor, but he pulled himself up until he was standing and turned to face me. He then raised a paw to his mouth and tilted his head to the side, as if the bear were confused as to why it was suddenly on the ground.
You can move on your own?
Bradley nodded.
And you can understand what I'm saying?
He nodded again, enthusiastically, even jumping up and down a little in its excitement. Honestly, it was kind of cute, maybe?
Can you talk?
He shook his head, no. I kind of ran out of questions at that point. When the silence dragged on too long, Bradley started dancing, reminding me a little of how Juniper danced, all legs and arms and jumping. Okay, I needed to take a breath. My house was now home to a dancing, moving bear that could understand human speech. I had to be asleep, dreaming. Except if I was dreaming, it was the most realistic, convincing dream I'd ever had. I pinched myself, but I didn't wake up. And Bradley was still dancing. Where the heck had this thing come from? I remembered what the woman at the store had said. He was sold in an estate sale. I decided to call the thrift store where we'd bought him. I found the number after a quick search online.
Hello? Good's new thrift store. How can I help you?
Hi. I was hoping to talk with someone who sold me something yesterday. I didn't get her name, but she had a tattoo of a flower on her wrist.
Oh, that's me. I'm Iris.
Iris, hi. Do you remember selling my daughter and I a teddy bear yesterday?
I asked.
Oh, yes. Your daughter was so cute.
Thank you. It's just, I remember you saying that you received the bear from an estate sale. I guess I just wanted to hear what happened exactly.
There was silence at the other end. I could only hear deep breaths.
Iris?
Did something happen?
She asked. Had she seen Bradley move? No, that couldn't be it. She wouldn't have sold the bear to us if she had. But maybe he ended up somewhere he shouldn't have been. Somewhere she was sure he couldn't have gotten to without someone moving him.
No,
I said.
just curious.
Another silence.
It was a fire. A family of 4 died in a fire. Arson, I heard.
Arson? Did that mean anything? It was strange that a teddy bear had survived a fire, but maybe the firefighters had responded before the blaze totaled the house.
I see. Thank you.
Wait,
Iris started, but I'd already hung up the phone. I wonder if... I felt a slight tug on my pants. It was Bradley. It took a large force of will not to jump away from him. He pointed to his arm, where I saw there was a little tear with some stuffing leaking out of it.
Oh, I guess that happened when I threw you, huh? I'm sorry, buddy.
I heard myself saying. Wasn't that weird? Why wasn't I more freaked out? He hugged my leg, as if to forgive me. I could admit the thing was very cute, now that the initial shock had worn off. But then he pointed to his wound again.
I'm sorry, I don't sew, so I don't think I can fix it. What about tape? I could tape it for you,
I offered. Bradley shook his head and instead pulled me towards the living room. He pointed to one of the small couch cushions. The couch was old, formerly white, and now a kind of threadbare gray. And Callie and I had been talking about getting a new one for ages.
I don't really get it, but I guess you can use it if you want,
I said. Somehow, out of the ether, or from within his body, Bradley produced a pair of scissors, as well as a sewing needle. He tried hopping onto the couch, but he was too short, so I gave him a boost. I was apprehensive about the self-ambulatory bear carrying a weapon, but I was too fascinated to intervene. The bear used the scissors to tear into the pillow, and then pulled loose some thread with dexterity that seemed impossible for a creature with no fingers. He then pushed the stuffing back into his body and sewed up the tear. It was incredible.
Wow, you're pretty handy,
I said. The bear nodded several times. The rest of the day, for lack of a better term, I hung out with Bradley. I couldn't think of what to do, or even if anything needed doing, so I just let him follow me around. At one point he seemed interested in the pen I was using, so I let him have it. He used it to draw me a picture. It was probably something a 5- or 6-year-old could do, and it was beyond belief that a teddy bear had been the one to draw it, but it was otherwise unremarkable. Not sure what else to do with it, I hung the drawing on the fridge, which made him jump for joy. Eventually, it was time to pick Juniper up from school. Even though he'd been nothing but friendly so far, I was still a little wary about leaving him in the house alone, so I decided to take Bradley with me. He clambered into the back seat and even managed to buckle himself in. It was all very adorable. I felt a little bit of anxiety while I waited for my daughter to show up. I had some questions for her. Did she know about Bradley? I didn't have long to wait. The school bell rang, and Juniper was one of the first kids to come bounding out the door.
Hi, Dad.
Hi, Junie. How was school?
I asked.
Good.
She said as she climbed into the car.
We had art today. Allie and I. Bradley! Dad, you brought Bradley!
Bradley unbuckled his belt and ran unsteadily over to Juniper to hug her arm.
Oh, Bradley, you're moving! It was supposed to be a secret.
Not wanting anyone to witness our impossible bear, I pulled out of the pickup area.
So you knew he could move?
I asked.
Yeah,
Juniper said.
I figured it out yesterday. That's why I wanted to bring him with me to school. I told him not to move until I got home, but I guess he didn't listen.
Bradley tilted his head to the side.
So, can we keep him?
Juniper asked, like the teddy bear was a stray cat she'd found in our backyard. That was the million-dollar question. Bradley was definitely unique, but maybe it wouldn't be any different than having a pet. He'd been nothing but gentle and sweet so far, even if it worried me that he could apparently materialize a pair of scissors whenever he wanted to. But then cats and dogs have teeth and claws, don't they? Juniper obviously loved him, and I was taken with the little guy myself. Oh man, what would Callie say? I'd need to get her opinion before any final decisions were made. But in the meantime,
He can stay with us until Mom comes home. Then we'll have a talk about it,
I said, my tone showing no wavering.
Okay,
Juniper said, a little uncertain since Callie was typically the stricter parent. Still, her mood rebounded once we got home. She showed Bradley every corner of the house and played with him until bedtime. He reacted to it all with his characteristic upbeat, cute mannerisms. Then finally, it was time for bed. Juniper was holding the teddy bear tight as I read her a quick bedtime story. But all the excitement had clearly worn her out. Her eyes were closed and her breathing was soft before I finished. I tucked her in and kissed her temple.
Night-night, Junie,
I said.
Good night, Bradley.
He turned to me and nodded once. I turned out the lights and closed the door. Left to my own devices, I puttered around the house for an hour or two, but I eventually headed to bed and fell asleep. I woke up with a splitting headache.
Ow, ow, ow,
I said, but that just made it worse. And I realized the source of the pain wasn't my head, but my mouth. Had I bitten my tongue in my sleep? No, there was way too much pain for that. I could barely think. My mouth was throbbing so bad. What time was it? I unlocked my phone and saw that it was 3:50 a.m. In other words, too damn early. I stumbled to the bathroom and flicked the lights on. Of course, they basically blinded me. So while I waited for my eyes to adjust, I took a swish of water and spat, noting the odd coppery flavor. Was something wrong with our pipes? I blinked rapidly, trying to force my eyes to get used to the sudden brightness. When I finally wasn't squinting, I opened my mouth and realized that, no, there was nothing wrong with our pipes. I'd been tasting blood, and a lot of it, because at some point during the night, my bottom right molar, the one closest to my canine, had been ripped out. Where there should have been a tooth, there was a profusely bleeding hole. My chin and neck had trails of blood all over them.
what the hell?
I said, with the faintest hint of a lisp, probably from the swelling. I raced back to my bed and turned a lamplight on. And sure enough, there were streaks of blood all across my pillow and bed sheets where I must have dribbled blood in my sleep. But wait, it hadn't been the sharp pain of having my tooth removed that had woken me up, but rather a painful ache and soreness. The after effects, essentially. That meant I'd slept through the removal of my tooth. Was that even possible? I didn't see my tooth anywhere, so it hadn't just fallen out. What in the hell was going on? Juniper. I needed to go check on my daughter. Still drowsy, I stumbled out of my bedroom, cracking my knee against the wall in the dim gloom of the hallway. That would hurt in the morning, but with the adrenaline pumping, I barely felt it. As I crept down the hallway, I noticed that light wasn't only coming from the lamp in my room, but Juniper's room as well. Her light was on. I stood in front of her door, debating whether to knock or simply burst in. Instead, I pushed the door open gently, not wanting to wake her on the off chance she was asleep.
Juniper?
I said, relief flooding through me when I saw she was there in bed, awake. She'd clearly been crying, and one of her hands was covering her mouth, but she'd probably had a nightmare and been afraid. So she'd turned the light on.
Dad,
she said, pulling her hand away to speak. That's when I saw. Her hand, her lips, her chin, and her teeth were all stained red. and her pink bedsheets, I now noticed, had streaks of darker shades in them.
Honey, what happened?
I asked, a lump in my throat. I had a feeling I knew.
Bradley took my tooth,
She cried and pointed into her room. I opened the door wider and saw that Bradley was there, covered in a circle of blood, gesturing and communicating with some thing. It was vaguely bear-shaped, roughly the same size as Bradley, with ears similar to his. Only it was bone white. The head was misshapen, resembling a poorly made crown. It had no eyes, but it had a mouth with human-sized teeth, and rivulets of blood running down its misshapen face. Its paws were long, almost dragging on the floor, and they ended in sharp, glinting points. The legs were the same. Actually, the tips were a bit pinkish, and from certain angles, it almost looked like a tooth. It wasn't bone white, it was enamel white. Bradley had stolen our teeth and made this thing. For what purpose, I had no idea, and I didn't want to find out.
Juniper, come here.
Something in my tone must have alerted the bears because they both froze. The tooth thing turned, and even though it didn't have eyes, I sensed it was looking at me, sizing me up. Bradley, with his two real blue eyes and sewn-on smile, definitely was. It was only then that I noticed he was holding a bloody pair of pliers. That must have been what he'd used to rip my tooth out. Slowly, I cautioned to Juniper, since it looked like she was about to bolt to my side. I didn't want to trigger either of them to attack. Juniper slowly crawled out from under the covers and tiptoed behind me. Together, we slowly walked out backwards through the door, the bears staring at us the whole time. Once we were past the threshold, I quickly slammed the door shut and held it closed, hoping to trap them inside.
Juniper, go downstairs and hide. Don't come out until I tell you.
But something banged against the door, then twice more in rapid succession. The white bear's knife-like arm punched through the door, tearing a hole in the wood and slicing my shin, though not badly.
Shit! Just do it!
I roared. Crying, Juniper scampered off. Damn it! If the tooth bear could break through the door, there wasn't much I could do to hold them off. Maybe I should have told Juniper to run to a neighbor's instead, but it was too late for that. Through the door, I heard something, a chattering, like when a person is cold and shivering and their teeth clatter together. There was another bang on the door, and the tooth bear's arm shredded through the wood, making another hole. But I'd already positioned my legs far enough away that they wouldn't get sliced if the tooth bear tried that again. After a while, the banging ceased. Then, a few minutes later, the sound of shattering glass could be heard. After another few minutes of silence, I took a chance and opened the door. No bears in sight. I checked under the bed and in the closet to be safe, but they weren't there. But Juniper's bedroom window had been broken. They must have escaped through it. Wherever those bears were, they weren't here. After the ambulance came, after I fed the police some lame story about being held against my will by a crazy man who stole our teeth, after Callie flew home, after Juniper got a lot of therapy, after we moved, after dental corrective procedures, and after things finally settled down, I would, when I was alone with the lights turned off, still hear the chattering of those terrible teeth in my head. SCP-1048 is a small teddy bear, approximately 33 centimeters in height. Through testing, composition of the subject revealed no unusual qualities that make it discernible from a non-sapient teddy bear. Subject is capable of moving on its own accord and can communicate through a small range of gestures. The subject regularly shows affection to individuals in ways found endearing by most people. Affection is usually given in the form of a hug to the lower leg, but subject has also been observed dancing, jumping in place, and in 2 separate events, it has even drawn childlike pictures for janitorial staff. All Foundation personnel that have interacted with the subject have responded positively to its affection, even D-Class with normally sociopathic tendencies. Attempts at direct communication with SCP-1048 have not been considered successful. Though it is capable of simple gestures to indicate a yes or no answer, it will often not react to lines of questioning concerning its nature or where it originated from. It is not known if this is because SCP-1048 simply does not know the answers, or because it does not want to answer. Though capable of drawing pictures, it has not used its art as a form of communication beyond showing affection, even when encouraged to do so. The more anomalous behavior of SCP-1048 was not observed until approximately 7 months after it was originally secured. It is hypothesized that the subject is able to construct crude replicas of itself using various materials, by a process that is yet to be observed directly by Foundation staff. Dr. Carver has suggested that SCP-1048 uses its endearing qualities to lull those around it into a false sense of security, allowing it to collect materials to produce these creations. Currently, there are 3 known creations of SCP-1048, designated SCP-1048-A, SCP-1048-B, and SCP-1048-C. The nature of these creations has been in stark contrast to SCP-1048's general behavior, as all have exhibited extreme violence towards humans. Hey guys, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more SCP stories like this one. You can also check out some more episodes from the SCP Experience podcast here. I'll see you in the next one.